Let's call the meeting to order for Tuesday, January 9th, the discussion session. We'll start with Mr. McGill.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll do the review of the agenda items and answer any commission questions. We have the introduction of an ordinance amending the Mount Lebanon Code to include newly enacted ordinances or amendments to existing ordinances enacted since January 24th, 2023. This is the codification ordinance. We do that every year. These are all ordinances that were previously approved by the commission. We're just codifying them all into one document. We will have the consideration of a resolution adopting Ascend Lebo as the official comprehensive plan for Mount Lebanon. We'll have the consideration for the award of a contract to install 2 grinder pumps for properties located at 43 and 49 Mayfair Drive. We'll have the consideration to purchase 1 Dopstat AK640K. I shall let you read this. High-speed grinder.
That's a perfect intro.
I know.
I did not write that.
This is the piece of equipment we refer to affectionately as the beast. To grind up all of the materials. We talked about it extensively during budget. And lastly, but not least, we have the commencement of pension benefits for 2 recently retired employees, Nancy Wenger and Julie Garuba.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with a presentation of design guidelines. Mr. Milliron and Ms. Benson. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thanks.
Thanks for inviting me to be here. Okay. So I think as most of you know, that after the streetscape project was complete, our feeling at the partnership, I'm on the board of the partnership, our next step was to create design guidelines. So thanks to Eric and the work of others, we were able to secure a grant from the state and cobble together $25,000 with partnership funds to create those design guidelines. We hired the consultant. If you'll remember, those design guidelines had 2 public meetings, all vetted, all based on best practice. Turned out, we thought, just a work of art. Thank you for bringing that along. So now it's time to implement the design guidelines. So the partnership is here to ask the commission to endorse the design guidelines as guiding principles for design in Uptown. And not to be confused with adopting them formally as a regulatory tool. This is endorsing them as principles for design, as guidelines. We understand that the municipality has allocated $25,000 for the facade improvement program. So we think that's going to go a long way and do marvelous things, but we need the design guidelines to guide that process of approving those facades. So that is our main, we wanted to just share that and ask for your endorsement. We also wanted to request that the commission request that staff prioritize and expedite proposed changes to the Uptown signage ordinance per the design guidelines. So in the back of that are the sign recommendations. And, you know, we think very important not to put off consideration of the sign guidelines until 2025. We have had a couple meetings about this and feel like signage isn't that hard. The wheel was already invented. We shouldn't be a heavy lift. We think it would be very popular with business and property owners, as the current ordinance is hurting Uptown business and businesses. Just a quick audit. There are 34 signs without lighting in Uptown. There are awnings missing too. 11 of our more vibrant businesses are missing primary business signs. And we can do a lot with 5K where it applies to signage in particular, as opposed to the larger facade question. So we understand that the municipality is retaining Pashek, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
For Vibrant Uptown 2 or Phase 2, I think we're calling it. And we.
There'll be a new name,
A new name,
a new name.
yes. Something that sounds completely different.
Correct.
But we would be happy to work, since we have people on the board, we would be happy to work with Pashek on getting this signage thing moving quickly so that we can start seeing the payoff of that. Well, the return on the investment of the streetscape and then also the facade improvement program.
34 businesses missing lighted signs, is that what you
Yep.
said? Thank you. Sorry,
And 11 of our.
11 missing signs,
Signs.
Ascension,
Just-
yeah.
So we're just wanting to underscore the urgency we feel about signage in particular, but also design guidelines in general. We're thrilled to be able to have this finished piece and be able to move ahead.
Eric,
Yes.
as you probably know, you can codify design guidelines in a historic district. You can't if it's not. Is there any desire to do that?
We haven't discussed that at this point. A lot of the inspiration for this was to secure facade grant dollars and to be able to
Right.
help and incentivize property and business owners to do the right thing by their facades. Codification of these guidelines in the historic district, that's a conversation we haven't had yet.
Was gonna be my question. I was interested if there was an appetite to make them compulsory, because I certainly see a need and would think that. Advocating for only goes so far, and I think that there's certainly room for.
These are tied to facade money, though. You have to follow the guidelines to get.
Yeah,
facade money,
there's.
right?
Correct, Commissioner. I mean, there's two different ways to look at it. One, there's the local funds, which the commission was very generous in offering. And again, I want to thank the commission for that, being visionary with that. It really is going to help us. It's seeding a program that we hope to see year after year after year. The design guidelines are going to be the sort of North Star document that we use in evaluating and interpreting applications as they come in. So what we need to do next is develop that application package. So we had that meeting last week, and I'm going to begin drafting that. These would also be, they're required, they're necessary for DCD to apply for facade dollars there. But again, back to the question of codification, that's not something that the partnership has discussed at this point. We wanted to get them done. They're in adherence. I think they would be easy to codify if that was something that the direction that we wanted to go. The Landmarks SGA was very mindful of that and intentional with how this was drafted.
I think it's an incredible document and a lot of great work is going to it, but I certainly see that I'm interested in the conversation with the next step.
Sure.
Because I think that Uptown needs a little help, and I think that could go a long way.
Right.
So as this currently stand, this is voluntary.
Correct. This is and it's even listed in the very first few
Oh, yeah,
paragraphs.
that's
It mentions that this is not, this is, again, it's a document for guidance and for the design committee or any other review committee to use to evaluate projects, but also to incentivize and educate business or property owners. So it's really meant to be a total package. It's a toolkit. But there's no teeth, there's no law behind it. There's no enforcement behind it. And that's not something that we had been advocating for or asking for at this point.
Thank you.
So at this stage, you're asking for some kind of like recognition of the plan. Whether it's a resolution, or other, just recognition that
Stamp
it
of
exists,
approval.
we support it, we think it's great work. Then you're asking for us to accelerate potentially the sign component outside of any other work, because in order to really activate that $25,000, we want to make sure that our sign ordinance is in alignment with the guidelines so that things are efficient. And then the third piece is looking at this as a more codified exercise, which would take some extra steps kind of post, but those are kind of the two key pieces. Just to make sure
That's what
right
they're
now, right?
asking for. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were asking whether
Yeah.
you wanted to have it codified.
Yeah, the third came from the commission, the
Yeah.
first two were from,
Right.
the first two were from the partner.
With baby steps.
Yeah, yes. I'm trying to get you in trouble.
No, no.
So, you know, that's just to say, yeah, this is cool. Is that enough in a discussion session, or does something have to be passed at, the main event to say, we think this is a great document, we hope everybody follows it?
Well, at one point in time, and I apologize for missing the beginning of the presentation.
All right, we will let you verbally.
I would have much rather been in here. We had talked about potentially, drafting some type of a memorandum of understanding, I thought, with the partnership for the design guidelines to try to unify.
Public art, I know we talked about.
We have an MOU
Yeah,
for
MOU
public
for
art.
public art.
So I don't know whether this would go the same route, Steve, or if the commission wants to take a different approach to that. I'm gonna tell you, I don't think you're required to do anything, quite honestly, with it, on a formal basis.
All right, okay, well, fine.
So not even a vote or anything, because this is a discussion session and that's.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got it.
if it was going to actually be an agenda item for the commission to take an action, it would be on a regular commission agenda. But again, I don't know that it needs to be there unless.
Listen, enough of discussion, if we all look and say, this is
Yeah.
fine,
I think we're all supportive.
that's enough.
It sounds like there might be some next steps, two of the commission serve on the partnership and,
Yeah,
could continue the conversation.
Yes.
yeah, again, I'd be very interested in having a conversation about the next step and it becoming formalized.
But maybe before that, the other thought being that if you can get some volunteer design people who understand signage in particular to volunteer their services, it's helpful. So often, I guess the saying is that so often when a design review board gets a design that's bad, you can make it better, but you can't make it good. The way to really do it is to be interjected in the very beginning. And people who understand and know design really have a grasp of color and things that some of us lay people couldn't possibly do. So the thought being, if you could have several people who are perhaps giving a very limited amount of time early on to people, it would be helpful.
Or there was a mention of funds set aside for signage, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a 25K, facade grant set aside, but signage is where you're gonna get the best bang for your buck.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it'd be great to approach then those property owners that they
For
could
sure.
use the help and.
Yeah, there's more to be teased out, commission, I mean, we're gonna, now that we have the dollars, now that these are, complete, we're gonna begin working on what I'll call the application package, which will, have a series of, steps, in that. And then just to address, the commissioner's comment, the design committee, one of, at least for myself, I really wanted to make sure that we have design experts on it. And so we do have a few architects on board, which are very, very helpful. And then we have some other folks that also have a professional understanding of design. So it's not just some ragtag group of folks. I mean, there's some real talent on the design committee.
And there's interest in helping in this regard.
Yeah.
And there's also awareness of some sign ordinances that have just been updated in other communities. We know we
Right.
can
That they
easily
bring to
lift
it.
those
Sure.
over and just
Yeah.
sign ordinances, as I understand it, have learned recently, are constantly being updated anyway because of technology and such.
Material changes,
So,
et cetera.
Yeah, we don't need to recreate the wheel here. We
Right.
need to borrow something, and it's gonna need to be continued to be looked at anyway over time.
And I'd like to sort of, I'll say, stay involved as the conversation evolves. So I have some thoughts and ideas on the whole issue of how to sort of facilitate moving some of that forward. So
Great.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Christina, you have grants for things?
The commission set aside 25,000, so that's a local source of funds. The Commonwealth also has facade grants. But as I mentioned at a discussion session during the budget hearings, those are really, it's a Byzantine process and the amount of money you get is limited. And then you get into L&I, prevailing wage issues. It's a real hairy mess. And so the 25K that we have from the commission will allow us to be a little more agile.
Do you have to comply with the guidelines to get the money?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then you need to adopt them.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
If it's our funding, correct?
oh,
If it's not, is it the partnership, if it's our funding issue?
it is our funding.
It's our.
25,000 is our funding.
We should adopt.
Okay. So we'll put them on an agenda item, please, for an upcoming commission meeting sooner as opposed to later.
Well, it's gonna take me a month or so to come up with an
I'll let you
application price.
guys work that out.
Yeah, so I mean, but
Sure.
between Keith and I will,
Yeah, that's kind of why I asked to sort of be kept
Yeah.
involved, because from a timing standpoint,
Okay.
theoretically, you could. I don't- You may potentially be able to move forward with partnership funds and then. Do
Yeah,
a reimbursement through the municipality, so.
yeah, I think we wanna do this right, not quick, if you follow me. So, I mean, we had a sort of a kickoff meeting last week. I'm gonna be, again, drafting sort of the package. We have, this obviously, other than it being public in this respect, we haven't advertised this. I haven't spoken of it until we get our ducks in a row.
Okay.
And this being a case in point with the solicitors. So,
That's good. Great.
And then one other side note, just that with the design guidelines, we can more easily apply for Keystone Community grants and other
Mhm.
rehab types of
Mhm.
funds. So it creates a foundation for us to be able to get more and do more.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Betsy.
Mission up.
See, it's hard to be taken seriously when you're flying cut up, We say. Okay, next on the agenda, and we're ahead of time. Comprehensive plan. Ian and Jenny.
Thank you, commissioners. We are here before you once again. As Mr. McGill mentioned, we have a item on the voting meeting tonight to vote to adopt the resolution for the comprehensive plan. So at the last commission meeting in December, we had the public hearing where there were several public comments. There were several people that also had submitted comments via letter or email to the commission, which the commission was all provided in advance of that public hearing as well. So after that meeting, there were some additional comments made, and Jenny and her team with Pashik went through, made a few tweaks to the document, mostly on a minor scale. I'll let Jenny summarize those. None of them amount to anything that would come close to a substantive change. And so the plan, we feel, is ready for consideration for the commission tonight. So we're here to kind of run through some of those final tweaks that were made and answer any final questions the commission might have on the document before you vote on it.
Great.
Good evening, everybody. So the changes we've made in the revised draft, the January 3rd edition, are not substantive in nature. We verified that the draft layout meets accessibility guidelines and adjusted the design on some specific pages to enhance legibility. We increased the body text font size throughout for the same purpose. We caught a few typos here and there. We added or reworded a handful of phrases to clarify the intent of recommendations. And we added a new pullout box and graphic on page 36 to define and explain the concept of gentle density, which is a zoning best practice the plan suggests warrants consideration as part of a broader zoning update. Concerns about density surfaced in public hearing comments, as well as some of those we received in writing. I want to emphasize that one really important purpose of a comprehensive plan is to fulfill the responsibility of local government to provide for orderly, sustainable future growth and development. So the plan, Ascend Lebo, recommends a comprehensive zoning update and stakes out some considerations that it should involve. Those considerations are rooted in community values that emerge during the planning process. Can the municipality become increasingly more sustainable, environmentally, economically, more inclusive and welcoming, more climate responsive, more healthy and active, less vehicle reliant, without taking away from what's important about the character of its neighborhoods? Absolutely, yes. The details of how that happens belong to future conversations about dimensions, uses, boundaries, et cetera. The plan does not commit the municipality to any specific zoning amendment. It acknowledges that a zoning update is a separate deliberative process with a high level of more specific engagement. The comp plan establishes the policy framework, development objectives, and considerations for that update based on the thousands of points of input this process has involved. More generally, in response to comments received, much of the work we've done during the last 18 months has involved listening to residents and discerning those broadly shared values that they told us they feel should guide local public decision-making. So our job as consultants has been to convene and consult various community perspectives and vetting which planning best practices are going to most faithfully serve those shared public values and make good practical sense. So this process has involved many, many partner agencies, focus groups reflecting a variety of perspectives, advisory board representatives, and members of senior staff, all of whom gave really generously of their time and their expertise to help make this plan as impactful as possible in laying out the priorities and action steps that have addressed those important local values.
Outstanding.
Is it possible, just so people can see that box, the blue pull-out box on
On
page
the general
36? I don't
density. Yeah,
Yeah,
we have
put
that.
that on the screen so the world can see.
Sure.
We can see it.
36, if that makes sense.
Need to make sure I'm logging into the discussion session meeting and not the regular commission meeting. That's not live. Yes, I will pull that up momentarily.
After he's done with that, I want to talk about office boutique overlay, which was a big concern by Mr. Grella.
Mhm.
I have some thoughts, but I'd like to bounce them off you, please. Sense?
Yes.
Questions, concerns?
No, thank you.
Okay.
One of the issues that, Commissioner Grella raised at one point was the idea on page 36 that we consider, again, the office boutique overlay. So my understanding of that is that it's typically small scale in a mixed residential area. It's commercial use. I kind of, when I use an example, I say bodegas in New York. In Boston, there are a lot of residentials that have pullouts where they've put in very small storefronts. Maybe it's, somebody dealing in antiques, or it's a tea room or something like that. I know that the request by the community was that we think about those near schools. But when I went driving through the community, and I actually made Jeff go on this drive today. I had him captive in my car, and I'm like, all right, here's where we're going. When you go down Castle Shannon Boulevard between Sunset and, where it turns off on Scott, right? Between,
Hitchhiker and the paints like Sherwin-Williams, basically.
yes, between those two. Yeah, there you go. That's much better, right? Yeah. No, don't give me the direction thing. Now we'll be lost.
The hitchhiker.
Yeah, but don't confuse
Pink
the
beard.
facts. Yeah, but you see a lot of these already. I don't think people are quite aware that they're there. And I was pointing them out to Jeff because like Yum Yum Asian food, that's a house that somebody put the front out of. There's a couple down near the pizza place Caliente's that are the same way. It's really very interesting. And that's one area that to me, it would make some sense. It clearly does not make sense in a typically all residential neighborhood. That's not what the suggestion is. Did I capture that well?
Yeah, I believe so.
I would say yes. If I can add a little bit of additional context.
You certainly can.
Okay, so I will attempt to share my screen again here. Let's see, there we go. So this is our zoning map overall. So that section of Castle Shannon Boulevard that you referenced, the dark reds in there, are zoned as C1 neighborhood commercial, and then the puke green, for lack of a better term, is R3 residential in between. So that street does kind of have some
Yeah.
split zoning between that. The other thing I'll mention is that we do have existing rules and regulations on the office boutique overlay. So the two
Oh,
green sections are the areas right now where the office boutique overlay exists. One is on McNeely Road and the other one is in Uptown. And really what the office boutique overlay does is just add some additional potential uses as either uses by right or conditional uses beyond what's already zoned there. So I think the thinking was, as we were going through the planning process, that since we already have a framework for some of these small scale
interventions.
yes, that we could consider when we do the full scale zoning update, maybe considering looking at other places where that office boutique overlay could be applied, since we already have existing regulations that allow for it in certain areas. The two dark red spots are the only two properties zoned with the mixed use overlay. So that's once again, I think we had some recommendations in the plan on that. The thinking was we already have rules within the zoning code on a mixed use overlay. I think both of those are R2 zoned properties as they currently exist with the mixed use overlay. So if there's any other properties where applying that existing overlay might make sense when we do the full scale zoning ordinance update, it might be worth taking a look at, are there any additional areas where that overlay could be applied?
And we did for additional perspective, because I was the planner at that point in time. When we went through the last zoning ordinance update, one of the things that we looked at was prior to the map that's in front of you, municipality had 28 what are referred to as transitional overlay districts. It was a concept that was probably popular, I don't know, late 80s,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
So we jumped on board, we used every letter of the alphabet, and then we had an AA and a BB because we ran out of letters. So when I looked at that, the majority of those were never utilized and really practically probably would have been very difficult to utilize. So we then shifted and created the three you see before you. The beige color that Ian did not reference is for a continuing care overlay.
Sure, makes sense.
And then the mixed use overlay is the Cosman property and the 1145 Bower Hill Road building that was originally built under a transitional overlay district. And then the office boutique, again, came from a process wherein we thought those two areas on McNeely, the one on McNeely and the one that is on Washington Road made sense for the area for which, in which they're located.
Yeah.
So I should say that, you know, with any of these proposals in the comprehensive plan, this is a general guide for the municipality over the next 10 years. There is an associated public process that will be part of anything that happens related to this. So it's not like you know, once this comprehensive plan is adopted that, you know, that's it. We don't have to do anything else. That's again, just a guide. It's a beginning, not an end. Correct. Very good way to state that.
Well, now I'll say consider.
Right.
To me, that's, we're gonna consider, talk, think about, look at before we adopt anything.
I think that's an important clarification, because that's certainly what I read in the comments. It seems to be that there was a concern if this is included in the plan, that all of a sudden that would open every single residential street up to one of these boutique type businesses, and you're saying that that is not the case. Okay, I think that is,
For what it's worth.
that is the concern, so I just want to make sure that that is
Can you
addressed
touch
directly.
for just 1 second on, I think this was a very important point when you were talking about home offices and loosening our regulations for home offices and why. I think it's important that you make sure everyone here's what you have to
Sure,
say.
you're ready
Well, I was
to
just
jump in.
gonna say, to close the loop on the office boutique
Yeah.
thing, I also pulled up, this is the section of the zoning code. So just as a brief overview of some of the additional uses that the office boutique overlay
Yeah.
allows as a use by right, you can see, flowers and plants, handicrafts,
sure.
jewelry, barbers and hairdressers, things like that. So
Okay.
just as a brief sample. On the low impact, no impact home-based businesses, we have existing regulations within our zoning code on no impact home-based businesses. There's a permit that's required, things like that. But there's also a couple stipulations, I'll say, within the code that we saw that don't necessarily seem to make a ton of sense. So one of them with the no impact home-based businesses is, I think you're only limited to using up to a certain amount of square footage of your home for said business activities. And so I think that was just something else that we identified as, hey, maybe we should take a look at this. Just partially also because of when we did our surveying, the increased numbers of people that are working from home nowadays. We had upwards of 35%
Mhm.
in the one survey said that they worked from home. So with more people working from home and doing different types of business activity from their homes that didn't used to be done in their homes, we thought this one, we did the comprehensive look at zoning, was a good opportunity to take a look at that section specifically as well, to make sure that what the stipulations are within that section in the zoning code kind of fit what we want.
What's in the code currently is more restrictive than what's in the municipality's planning code, the definition that most communities use. So we think it's worth at least taking a look at.
Well, I think, it's interesting when you talk about the square footage limitations, because I think that early on in zoning, that was one of the ways to identify how much traffic you might generate on the street, which is something we do want to control.
Mhm.
And that's not really so, doesn't make the same correlation anymore. Okay. I'm okay with that. How about you guys?
I would just suggest olive green rather than puke green, other than.
Is everybody comfortable with it? Do you have any more questions? Got the experts here right now.
Were there any other hot topics that came up again and again that we need to discuss?
I think the biggest ones that we saw kind of continually through the process was that the primary interest of residents is in parks and recreation. That was far and away, any survey question we asked, the number one response of,
Absolutely.
what should the municipality invest in? And I think consistently, we heard from people about walkability and mobility and being able to, the idea of origins and destinations, get to their destinations in the easiest way possible and having a variety of means to do that. Even going back to the very first survey that we did when we asked, what do you like most about Mount Lebanon and what would you like to see change? I think the most common topic was, I love the walkability of Mount Lebanon, but I wish it was more walkable. So we saw a ton of people say both for both things. And so I think coming out of the plan, the impetus for investment in Parks and Rec and walkability and mobility were kind of the two big takeaways for me from public feedback.
One more thing I'm gonna bring up that I think will be a hot topic, perhaps tonight at the meeting. So there is on page 116, plan for planning, which shows all of the studies that we are planning to undertake, and it certainly says that the zoning ordinance update would be, the RFP would be issued in 2025, with the plan being totally adopted by 2026. I think a little bit of a conversation about the active transportation plan would be important, because I do understand that there is concern tonight by somebody about road diets and what that means. So if you can give a moment's thought
Sure.
about that.
As I'll speak briefly about the table and then I'll turn it over to our certified planner and planning expert to talk about some of the intricate details. But as we were going through the comprehensive plan and just looking at all the other things that were either going to be recommended in this comprehensive plan document or are required by previous commission actions like the climate action plan, being required by the resolution that was passed 2 years ago, that we started to see, oh, there's a lot of future planning activities that have to happen. And given the staff capacity within the planning office of essentially 1.5 people, that, we tried to structure it out and say, okay, there was a commission directive when Gateway came in and presented on the South Garage study to say, hey, we don't want to be caught behind the 8 ball here. We want to be ready to go on this South Garage. We need to do a feasibility study on what we're doing with this ASAP. So that was kind of top of the priority list. And as we went through and saw the tremendous interest that residents had in walkability, in mobility, in accessing different locations throughout the municipality, the idea of an active transportation plan really started to take shape. And then as we started to have other meetings with other entities like PennDOT on a variety of issues, PennDOT even recommended we consider an active transportation plan, because a number of other communities have done it. A number of communities in Connect have looked into it. Some of our neighboring communities are considering it. So we started having conversations with them about a joint active transportation plan. So it really seemed to make sense that when we started thinking about what needed to come next out of this comp plan, that an active transportation plan really rose to the top. And that was one of the things that the commission weighed last fall when you went through your budgeting process and opted to fund the active transportation plan in this year's budget. And we've applied for some grant money as well, some federal funds to help fund that project, and we'll see hopefully early this year if we'll find out if we are successful in getting those grant funds. But it really seemed like when we were going through the planning process that the active transportation plan and the South Garage study kind of had the precedence of the ones that needed to be done first. And then following that, the zoning ordinance update, and that kind of fell to the following year, mostly from a staff capacity standpoint, that we're still obviously finishing up the comp plan this year. We're finishing up the Main Park site plan and recreation center architectural study. So just given the amount of hours that are available of planning staff in the municipality, we don't have the time to take on 4 major planning projects in a given year. So and then this is kind of a scaled recommendation of when we should consider doing some of these other ones leading up to our next comprehensive plan, that'll happen a decade from now.
Right.
So I'll let Jenny answer the question about the road diet. in more
Yes, with
detail.
regard to road diet. So the mobility chapter of the plan is built around what we interpreted as this really strong public mandate to elevate the priority of people moving around the community outside of a vehicle, particularly walking. The chapter also advances implementation of the complete streets policy and takes a look at how that can be operationalized and made consistent with other policies and programs and things happening in the municipality. So during our conversation, but our focus groups and our public outreach, we were talking about ways that, what would that look like, ways that might be implemented. Particularly, I'm thinking of Uptown on Vale, based on the conversations that PennDOT and Dormont have been having with the municipality. We kicked around some ideas for how the cartway could be reconfigured. So nothing touching the sidewalk. We are not touching the streetscape, but within the cartway, within the lanes of travel, we threw out for public consideration different configurations, what that might look like. What would a planted median with turn lanes look like? How would that operate? What opportunities would that open up? And the most popular among everybody we talked to that day was a planted median and subtraction of 1 lane. So we brought that up at our mobility focus group, and Anna Gorick from the county expressed interest in adding county roads to that list of potential road diets. That's why these are in the plan for consideration. Again, these would involve additional public conversations, and certainly your engineer would be involved. And for roads the municipality doesn't own, municipality cannot design them. So you're simply a stakeholder in those conversations. But we think they're conversations worth having.
And just to put some underlines in there, words used like for consideration. For
Yeah.
further analysis.
Yes.
That this is not as I said earlier, this is a beginning, not an end. This is
Exactly.
Right.
a collection of ideas
Mhm.
that require further discussion, evaluation, consideration, that sort of thing.
I think Commissioner Grella expressed concern on page 85, pursuing strategies to protect and promote safe routes to school in Mount Lebanon. Item D under number 4 was consider zoning amendments to require land development plans on sites of 1 acre or larger to contain walking easements and trails to enable pedestrian connections. I think that was one of his concerns. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't have a problem with anything that we would consider, because I think the best zoning that will come out of this is to consider a wide range of things and then really discuss what it is that we think we would need and could help us develop so that we meet our community's desires and wants. But I want to point that out because I do believe that's one he actually noted.
And the background on that one was really to try and increase pedestrian connectivity
Yeah.
between areas. And while the municipality doesn't own a lot of land within the community outside the parks, this kind of grew out of something that the planning board had been discussing and something that the Parks Advisory Board had been discussing about thinking about municipal parks as thoroughfares and
Yes.
connectivity between neighborhoods and
Mhm.
how we could use our parks to better establish things. And as we talked through, mobility, origins and destinations and zoning, we started to think about, well, one of the opportunities we have is when developers come in to look at larger properties. And do we want those development plans for larger properties to be isolated islands, or do we want them to have connectivity between neighborhoods and maybe potentially expand the ability of pedestrians to have new shortcuts to be able to access different places? Because after all, as we like to say, we're Mount Lebanon, not flat Lebanon. So there are topographic issues around the community, and any ways to
Right.
alleviate those with, pedestrian connections we thought had some value.
Yeah. I agree with that. Actually, I'm the one that, I know you're gonna throw darts at me. Would love to open up paper streets so people can walk through them. Nobody else shares that, okay? Let me just put that out there. That was just an Ann Swatter Wilson comment.
I know some paper streets that people essentially use already, so, it's
Well,
there.
this is not the time to have that discussion. Should I
Yes,
do
I
it? Right now.
Just to bring us back for a second to the issue of a road diet,
Yeah.
municipality actually approached PennDOT in 2013
Oh,
with a
wow.
request that they do a study for a road diet. I passed that information on to the current administration.
Yeah.
PennDOT is good background information.
Mhm.
A little different mindset, thought process at that point in time.
Yeah,
PennDOT essentially did a traffic analysis and said that, our mission is to move traffic from point A to point B in the most expedient manner
right.
possible.
Mhm.
And as such, we are not willing to consider a road diet for Washington. So, fast forward a decade and we're revisiting the conversation. And I will tell you that there are people who road diet and you referenced a couple of different options with a center median.
Yeah.
You can also do 1 lane north, 1 lane south, and have a center turn lane. You can do something similar to what happens up on Green Tree Road, where at certain times of the day you have
Right.
2 signalized lanes headed
One way.
into town and then it flips for the evening rush. So there's a whole
Yeah.
variety of iterations. The other considerations, obviously, as part of any discussions that move forward, will need to be involving the business community because
Absolutely.
we've got a business community here on Washington Road that at least for
Mhm.
a section on one side does not have a rear service out.
Right,
So that offloading of deliveries occurs in one of the 2 travel lanes,
Right.
which is permitted under our ordinance.
Yep.
So we'd have to figure out a way to, again, make sure that we are not negatively impacting one very vital segment of the
Right.
population to make a
Mm.
potential improvement for another. So there's always a balance, it's always a conversation, and it's always a very public conversation, so.
Agreed, but I think in the kind of point is that there's been, in every instance of a road, narrowing down and adding more pedestrian traffic or bike traffic, sales have gone up. It proves to be a pretty big boon for retail sales.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of figuring out sort of those operational issues,
Sure.
if you will.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, anything that we can do to accommodate as many forms of travel as possible is to the benefit of the community and to those businesses.
Right, as it was such a priority, as labeled by the community, so I think that's great.
Anything else anybody can think of? Well, we have Jenny here and we're 15 minutes ahead of time. We have like 15 minutes worth of questions. You can ask.
No president could never.
Nothing else, huh?
We would do.
No, wait, I do remember
Yes.
one other. I remember one other that Commissioner Grella expressed concern about, and that was fees. That was under financial management. Fees, we are now going to be charging, as you know, a fee for waste management. And he questioned, and of course, can I find it quickly? No. Here it is, right here. Here, number 4, consider service level
150.
expansions that provide additional municipal fee-based services or programs to incentivize private behaviors that benefit the public good. I hate to speak for him, that's not very fair, but I have to because he's not here. I believe his concern about this was that we as a commission had not discussed it. To me, this again is a starting point for further discussions about whether we want to do this kind of thing or not. Yeah, it says consider, but I did find it very interesting to think about a fee for private sidewalk repair and installation. I thought that was pretty fascinating. No one else shares my excitement, clearly. Oh, thanks.
Excited on the inside.
Huh?
So I'm excited on the inside about
Oh, okay, good,
it.
good.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just, if we want more sidewalks, there are places, there's one connecting to Outlook, which is my neighborhood, where there's one house on one side of the road, the other side too, but one house that doesn't have sidewalk. And I don't know whether they would want a sidewalk or not, so don't take this any further, but you know, this kind of thing, if they did, if you provided something with a fee, you don't have to go hire the contractor, get the engineering, et cetera. We do it and charge you to do it. Not a bad deal. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and in some form or fashion, it's not necessarily a service level expansion,
Yeah,
but the revised sidewalk policy
policy could be put in there.
is in
Yeah,
the same,
Yeah.
I'll say, thought process.
Right, yeah. Just thought maybe. You guys are not very excited.
Another
I
one
will
that-
come up with another question.
Another one that came up was doing away with park minimum. So it's personally, I support, I think it's,
Yeah.
I think it matters and in every instance where it's happened in other communities, it seems to have encouraged a lot of new development, but I don't mean to just sit here and advocate for it. I'd be interested in why you included it and your thoughts behind that.
As a technical solution to address the things people told us were important. So we heard that, Uptown in particular has, an ample supply of parking and maybe some of that space could be put to better use. And particularly that, the parking minimums as they are have been an impediment to development and, tenancy uptown.
All right, I appreciate that.
I think a lot of it came out of the feedback we got from the Uptown District in particular, that, because we have 2 parking structures.
Yeah,
Plus
yeah.
on-street parking, and just kind of the lived experience of, the hotel project and some other,
Was that therapy?
and some other projects in and
Right.
around the Uptown
Yeah.
area that, you know, in our central business district core where we have
Mhm.
off-street parking that's
Provided,
provided, you know, maybe looking at what the parking minimums are, maybe looking at some of the other zoning requirements in that area and saying, you know, is this creating the most conducive atmosphere for future investment in the district, or are we actually raising barriers that make it difficult for investment in our business district? Because we want people to invest in
Right,
our district.
Maybe not here tonight, but at some point I'd like to get some input, because again, go back several years, one of the challenges to the elimination of parking requirements was not necessarily from a municipal standpoint, but it was from a lender standpoint. So it
Oh,
didn't
that's
matter
interesting.
if we had parking
Yeah.
requirements. A lender, in order to issue
To finance
financing,
it.
Mhm.
was
Puts in the
requiring a
requirements.
certain amount of parking. So I don't know if that's still the case,
I don't
I would
either.
imagine that's changing. I mean,
but it would be interesting to
Hmm.
at least get some updated information related to that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. Learn something new every day.
I was gonna go back to page 86 of section 7. Is it back to the additional steps required, where there's some, bullet points, A through G here? It still required commission action, and so I think that's the point about back to this being a start rather than finish, where there would be votes on this sort of thing, for these ideas that are in that section. So even if, there's only one that says consider, but I would think all of these, at some point, there's something that the commission has to decide on a budget, on creating a line item for a budget or increasing a paving budget or something. All those require some action, individual actions by commission. So there's a lot of granular stuff
Right.
that would have to happen.
It takes a lot more discussion to decide if we want to do it or not.
Exactly.
And one of the things that we did try and do with the recommendations in this plan, the two major, I think, guiding principles of the plan overall. Number one was to align the sections of the plan with the new advisory boards.
Yes.
So that the 5 major sections of the plan correspond to the 5 new municipal advisory boards. So then the recommendations of the comp plan become the work plans for the new advisory boards, so that we're not constituting these new boards in a few months and them saying, well, what are we supposed to do? It's you constitute the boards and here's the section of the comp plan, give us recommendations on how to implement this. The other thing is that the commission has, seen for a number of years is the integration of the comprehensive plan with our annual capital improvement program. So what this number 7 does is capture a lot of the common items that are in the capital improvement program every year, and just codify them within the comp plan so that we're not losing something when we go into a future capital plan and say, oh, well, in the 2013 plan, there was a corresponding item that
Right.
repaving the roads helped accomplish, but we didn't put that in this one, that we wanted to make sure that, okay, we had so many conversations last year about the pavement condition index and things like that, that those items were still codified within this plan, so that then when we make the capital improvement program later this year and update it annually, we're saying, okay, this is how much we're recommending spending in capital to help achieve this goal in the comprehensive plan of maintaining a pavement condition index of 60 or greater.
Got it.
As an example.
Well, come on, guys, anything else? You don't have to.
Not a gateway, you'll be fine.
Gateway, oh yeah, that'll take forever. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your work on this, Jenny and
Thank you.
Ian. It's a heavy lift and I really thought it was fascinating. I've read it twice now. Somebody better give me something better to do with my time, right? But it's really well done. It really has a lot of interesting thoughts that go in it, a lot of interesting suggestions. Not sure I like the massing for the south garage, but that's another conversation, so.
It is. It has been a
Yeah.
tremendous honor to work with you all and with the residents and the staff of the community.
Thank you.
Thanks to Jenny and her team at Passion, Elaine Kramer and the other sub-consultants on the project with Yard and Company and Reed Masiocha with, Evolve now. So the whole project team that was put together for this project really worked well together. And I think the fact that we had so much public input, over 5,000 points of public input really speaks
That's
well
amazing.
to the interest level of our community
Yes.
and just the way we were able to get the word out about the planning process and everything that was happening over the last 18 months. So this has been a really, really great process to work through, and I'm very happy with the result. And I am hopeful that we pass the resolution tonight to adopt the plan.
Thanks. Thanks for your input. Okay, moving on. Dan, Rob, Josh, Scanlon, Gateway, engineers.
Yeah, we're here to talk about the mundane stuff.
I know.
I requested Gateway do this,
Sure.
partly for Commissioner Siegler, who's new and has not yet been through sort of some of the annual contracts that we award, the process that we use when we go out to bid. And just as a sort of a high level overview of engineering contracts that are awarded.
That's a good idea. Take it away.
Okay, we're here because we want to discuss the, 2024, when the, annual contracts they're put out for various, infrastructure work in the community. Josh is here with me tonight. He's gonna touch on some of the various, sort of the contracts that we had. I'll talk about some of them, and then we're going to just kind of lay out with you what you expect to see in terms of agenda items, various contracts coming in front of you that you're aware of. When they come along, you'll say, hey, why are we doing this? That's it. So that's sort of the agenda. And I'll turn it over to Josh to talk about each contract.
So a little bit of background on some of the contracts that are implemented. Municipalities located within Elkasan. Everybody knows about the consent order that we're under, and there's long-term planning associated with the region's infrastructure. That consent order has led to the creation of many of these contracts that are annual contracts, and that it's used to as a part of a yearly maintenance for the sanitary and the storm sewers.
You know about the consent order? Okay, you want to explain the consent order?
Yeah, the consent order is basically a handout from the EPA onto Alcosan, the requirement to remove the wet weather issues that we experience in our overall sanitary sewer system for the 83 communities. To eliminate the frequency of pollution to the rivers and streams. And as that moves up into the sheds of the Alcosan overall shed that goes to Alcosan, we become responsible for our own community to try to eliminate inflow and infiltration into the system. So we have a number of mechanisms that we're going to talk about to do that.
And one of the things that Alcosan was proposing early on was that they put holding tanks on the rivers, which of course would ruin the riverfronts, my opinion, but it would. Hold sewage so that it couldn't flow into the river. So a lot of this work is to avoid that kind of.
Yeah, it was an unaffordable plan in the first go around.
Yes,
And so what they did was they said, okay, we can't convey it all.
right.
Would have to build these massive systems. So we want you to go back, diagnose your system and try to take some of that water out.
Yeah, and you see a lot of, like down in DC and some of these other major metropolitan areas, they're building these giant systems. And they cost, upwards of $1 billion because they have to go so far down, right? So there's all this, massive infrastructure. So you either build down where the problem is trying to be solved, or you try to mitigate upstream, right? And clearly, this is a much more, cost-effective method, but it requires the action of lots of municipalities.
Yeah, but the city does have mostly combined sewers, so that's much harder.
It's a whole
problem.
different story.
That's a whole different game.
Those are
yes.
permitted. They're
Yes.
permitted to dump into the
Yeah.
river. That's the
Permitted to
difference.
dump it.
We have a separate sewer system, so we're not allowed to have any overflows from any of our system. Whereas the city has minimum controls and they're allowed to overflow.
So when you drink your water tomorrow? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Aaron.
So on the topic of contract renewals, bids were received in various years for all the contracts. This year, lining, manhole rehabilitation and backwater valve maintenance were bid out. Many of these contracts are multi-year contracts, and what that does is that provides continuity in contractors from year to year and basically incentivizes them to, one, give a better price and improve and provide the best quality possible. And it also ensures competition and incentivizes them to keep bidding.
I know what a backwater valve is, but I'm gonna bet most of the people in the room don't. Would you mind explaining it?
Yep, I got a slide on it here in a couple more. If you want.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a picture there, it'll be easier to show it. So the ones we bid this year are lining is annual, manhole rehabilitation, that is a multi-year contract, and backwater valve maintenance is a multi-year contract.
I add one thing into your contract renewal. that the other reason that we do it in base year with options for 2 years out is that if there are changes in market prices, we're in the best possible position, because if those prices have gone up from a material standpoint, contractors locked in. If they go down, we have the flexibility to go back out for bid and take advantage of those decreases. Sorry, thanks, John.
Mhm.
So one of the contracts that we have is sanitary and storm sewer cleaning and televising.
Mhm.
And essentially, this contract is how it sounds. We televise the sewers and we clean them as part of it. What this does is you get eyes on the sewer, you identify defects, and you're able to propose repairs to fix the defects. It allows us to take a proactive approach in our maintenance program. This was last bid in 2022. Last year was a renewal, and this year we are recommending a renewal for Roto-Rooter, who is the current contractor. This will have to be bid in 2025, so.
We don't say the mileage of the sewer system, but we have roughly 150 miles of sanitary sewer. So you try to TV about 10% of that a year, 15 miles. It's a fair amount of work just to get that done.
The next contract we have here is the storm and sanitary sewer point repair contract. This is essentially your excavation repair contract. So you televise the pipe, you find an issue in the pipe, you issue a work order to this contractor. They go out and dig down to replace that section of bad pipe. Neando is currently the contractor for this contract. This was bid in 2022. This year would be a renewal year for that. We would have to bid this one in 25.
And this started out as a sanitary repair contract, but we've expanded it to storm sewers. So it makes sense. It's the same type of work. It's just a different system that we have.
Yeah.
So we have one contractor on call for either sanitary or storm sewer work. And one other thing while he's changing the slides is, I mean, these contracts, we work with Rudy, obviously, and his department. Every year there always seems to be some little nuance that we add to these contracts when we go out. There's something we learned, there's something that changed or whatever. So that they are evolving in some cases as we move along, technology changes, that kind of stuff.
Yep. So the next contract I have here is the chemical root treatment contract. Each year, there's a select amount of pipes in the system that we target for this contract, and essentially this inserts a chemical into the sanitary sewer system. It's almost like a shaving cream type chemical, and it essentially kills the roots that are coming into that pipe. It doesn't kill them all the way up to the tree. It just a few feet outside the pipe, and what it does is it decays the roots in there, and then when we go through and clean, they come out. So this helps to alleviate backups in the system, and it's just an added measure to protect the system. Duke's Root Control is the contractor for this. This is a very specialized contract. The original contract year was 2023, so we'd be looking at a renewal for this one this year as well.
And we are, as we line pipes, which Josh is going to talk about, we eliminate the need for this. So this will ultimately reduce to the point where we won't need it anymore. Because once you put a liner in the pipe, you've eliminated the ability to root to come in the old terracotta pipe.
Really?
Yes.
So the root can't come in through the lining?
It's a sealed,
That's
closed, it's a
amazing.
closed sealed system at that point because it's looking for the water. And
Okay,
it comes,
sure.
it comes
So
in,
it won't
it comes in
because it
the
can't-
old
yeah.
joints on the pipe, which it can reach in and find the water.
Not interesting. Huh. Cool.
The next one we have here is manhole rehabilitation. This is one that we bid this year. So we will be recommending the award to the Robinson Pipe for this contract, as they are the low bidder.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, sorry. So this one's bid this year, and then we have options for renewal in 25 and 26. And this one is, the pictures in here basically explain the work. We go through and we target manholes that are brick manholes or have high infiltration, and then we essentially seal them up with a cementitious liner. we'll replace the steps. It makes it better for Public Works to access the manhole and essentially renews it. And here's the backwater valve. So essentially what this is it is a device that prevents sanitary sewer backup in the home. So it allows one-way flow through the sewer pipe. So you place this on the home's lateral, and if flows inside the main line get to a certain elevation, it's gonna wanna back up the lateral. This prevents that from backing up into the house. So what we do with this contract every year is we inspect the backwater valve. So they're removable. You're able to pull them out of the ground and look at the valve and just make sure all the parts are operating correctly. That's what this one
Every
is.
house have one of these?
No, not every house. I think there's about 80 or so
Yeah.
that we inspect.
So they're temporary. We don't like to talk about them. They're temporary because our goal is to ultimately prevent there from being those types of situations that will
Got it.
cause the backup. But unfortunately, some homes are built at such a close elevation to the sanitary sewer that when the pipe even fills up to its normal level or fills to capacity, it could potentially back up to that.
Okay,
So it's just the way things were built back then.
sure.
And then,
Sure.
you throw in the extra water and it can be a
Yeah.
problem. So, as the system is improved and as we meet this consent order work to hit the gold line standards, I would see the regulators as saying that these need to be taken away at some point in time.
Interesting.
But they have provided, they've obviously helped
Oh, yeah.
reduce the frequency and flooding. And I think it's really been a good thing that we've done.
And annual lining contracts, this is essentially a liner that is inserted through the existing pipe. There's an epoxy attached to the liner, and it's activated either by water, steam, or UV light, and that hardens and essentially forms a new pipe within the pipe. And that we are able to do this without excavation, so it's the least amount of disturbance and
Yep.
gives you a new pipe. The current contractor in 2023 is Jet Jack. They are the low bidder for the 2024 bid that we just put out. So we would be recommending award for them in 2024.
And this is one of the contracts that we always continuously look to see if we can make improvements. So we changed, a couple of years ago, we changed our notification system to potentially impacted property owners. We also changed procedurally in terms of the distances that we're lining and who gets that notification. Again, all trying to improve the process so that we have to reduce the number of phone calls that we'll get from a resident that says, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but I've got an odor in my house and I really can't tolerate it. And so
Try
again,
to learn from experience.
Yeah.
How many miles or what percentage of the system is lined at this
I
point?
think at this point, did we say it was like 25, like it's almost a quarter of the system.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
pretty close.
we had it, we have a number on, we'll let you know, but it's substantial.
Yeah.
When you do it over time, and some of these bigger projects that we're taking on in the next couple of years are gonna really spike that number up higher. In fact, the one we're gonna recommend next month.
is this one of the contracts that we've been able to get some funding from Alcoasand through road grants for?
Absolutely, yeah, we've received every program that's been available. That's the Alcoasand program to incentivize innovation in trying to deal with the wet weather issues. We've been successful in showing them that there's been reduction due to these projects. It's one of the few places the municipality can get any grant money related to
Right.
stuff.
Standing.
You said source warning site, right?
I love sewers. Well, if you look at them when it comes to civilization, I mean,
Yeah.
that when they
It's
came
the
up with
difference between
sewers.
life and death.
That's right. It made the difference between life and death and you
Yeah.
know, things like horrible diseases and all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. They're really important historically, but I'll
Yes.
stop talking about.
So the consent order, I'll just say on the consent order, what you are gonna see this year is we talked to the commission in last fall about some bigger projects meant to address the consent order, which is again, to try to get down to what they call a gold line standard, which is a certain amount of gallons per day that we're allowed to measure in our system that they see as acceptable at this point in time. So our goal is to sort of strategically do the lining that Josh just talked about and the other things that we know are known methods of being able to do this. And we're now gonna take some big chunks of area where we've done a lot of investigative work over the past 5 years and really know where those things are. Because that's the difficult part of this all is that the word is that 80% of your water comes from 20% of your system. But it's difficult to find the time and when that comes. And when you see that, there's different responses to the system when it rains. You know, I've always, I sort of talk about this every once in a while, but the age of our system and when people built homes, unfortunately, we don't know what goes on beyond the home wall. And French drains weren't as popular when our homes were constructed. And unfortunately, a lot of our sanitary sewers do act as French drains. So as much as we might do on the public side of things, or even all the way up to the home, it ultimately isn't gonna get everything.
Right.
So I'm just trying to gauge expectations, but we're doing our best.
So the next slide we have here, jumping from sewers into ADA ramps. This project, so the schedules are a little bit confusing on the ADA, the CDBG grant projects, but this is the 2023 ADA ramp project that will be built this spring. I list on here the intersections in which the ramps will be improved. The contractor for 2023 for this contract is Joseph Palmieri Construction. They did the ramps on last year's contract and they did a good job on them. So that covers.
So just as background, again, in terms of grant money, this is one of the few places that we're able to get grant money. It is community development block grant money, which is, we qualify because it's an ADA improvement. So we've been doing this for the past forever, right, Rudy?
Yeah.
It feels like it.
And it's also a grant that is administered through SHACOG, South Hills Area Council of Governments. So they are sort of the agency, the administrator.
And the standards related to this, the difficulty in trying to get the ramps to work in accordance with the regulations, sometimes in Mount Lebanon can be challenging. So you will see little walls that we need to build and other things that have to be constructed to actually get the gradient that's particularly required to meet the ADA specs.
Yeah.
Next one here are the 2024 CDBG grant ADA ramps. These ones are going up along Bower Hill Road. So we have the full application approved. What will happen is they'll give us the notification to prepare specifications, typically late summer. We'll get those prepped. SHACOG will put those out to bid, contractors bid, and they'll notify us of the apparent low bidder, and then we assist them through prepping the contract docs from there. So it says 2024, that contract gets awarded late this year.
Okay.
And it will more than likely be built next spring in 2025.
The next number of slides are related to roadway maintenance, not in any particular order. But we start out with talking about sealing the cracks that develop in the roads. This is a good maintenance process that we do every year. The philosophy is that you take care of your roads that are in good condition and you reconstruct your roads that have fallen apart or fall below a certain level. Mount Lebanon's fortunate to have invested significantly in its road program. In addition, we benefited the past couple of years with utilities, doing a lot of work on our roads. So we're in a good condition. We did a presentation last year regarding the overall condition index of the paving. But it's a continual investment that you have to make in your system to make it work. And So this is one of the methods that we use. Roadway maintenance on brick streets. This in all the discussions related to brick streets. There's been an increased emphasis on maintaining our good brick streets. Annually, we help Public Works put out these contracts, and then Public Works administrates the contract itself. So with the budgeting related to brick streets, the last year's contractor was Next Construction. It'll be bid again in 2024. This is our roadway, I'll call our mill and fill program, which is basically we mill down through the top material and into the binder. We apply new binder and wearing course on roads that are in good condition. Last year, our contractor was Melee and Melee. We bid this annually just because prices change every year and there's good competition within this sphere of work. So we do get different contractors from time to time on this. And then our big project yearly is the reconstruction project, where we actually go down and replace the road in total. Along with that, we're putting in storm sewers where we can get them in, addressing ice spots. We actually start from the base of the material. We build new curbs. We put in drainage under the curbs. And essentially, this is a street that we expect to last at least 25 years before there's any maintenance on it. And when we do maintain them in the future, it'll only be replacing the paving. So you sort of build the base of the structure, and you'll just be improving upon it as the years go by, you know, with material that can be recycled, and it's the material of choice in the world today of roads.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I know we have gas and water lines under our roads. Where would electric lines go if we buried the electrical? When we're redoing the roads, would that still go in the road or would it go?
Yeah, I mean, if electrical conduits, if you could bury them, could go anywhere. I mean, the challenge in electrical underground is, number one, it's super expensive. I think last time I priced it years ago, it was $1 million a mile. Very expensive. And then secondly, where do you put transformers? You have to create a place to pull the transformers off the pole, put them on the ground, which becomes a challenge too. I mean, it can be done, but
Well, we did it at Hoodrich Islands. I mean, they're all buried over there, but I have seen the transformers. They're in people's yards.
because it's a more modern plant.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
just curious when you're redoing a road,
Yeah,
could you bury electrical conduit?
we did it on Washington Road. We just did it out front for the sidewalk project.
And as a general rule, I would tell you that we try to keep it not necessarily under the road surface, but within the right of way.
Okay,
Side of the
sure,
road, if that makes sense, in a
does.
sidewalk area
Yep.
or,
Yes,
again,
the cartway is generally 24 feet wide.
Uh-huh.
And then outside of the curb, you have your curbs, and then between the curb and the right of way line, there's generally approximately 12 feet.
Yeah.
On each side.
Sure. Yeah, just curious. Thanks.
Roadway maintenance, rejuvenation, this is a process where we use an emulsifier. Actually, we put this down on our brand new roads. The idea of this is this was a technique that was developed by the Air Force, actually for runways. We've been doing it for 25 years. It's really cheap to do. It's basically where you take and you rejuvenate the top surface of the paving material. I say to people that we don't make blacktop anymore, we have great top. Because the roads between sunlight and everything else, you see roads change from black to gray almost immediately. And what that is that the modern day asphalt plants are so defined on the materials and how much oil they put in the material. They limit that. We also have a lot more aggregate in our paving than we ever did before. So when you rejuvenate this top surface, it really just penetrates down maybe a ½ inch, but it's a huge difference in keeping the road from starting to crack, which is the goal. So we do this annually. It'll be bid again, pavement technology. Again, like Josh said, this is very specialized, but it's a good process.
How long does it extend the life of the road, do you think?
I think we talked in the range, we try, you have to do it like every 5 to 7 years, or you do it again.
Mhm.
And then, before we do any of the work on the actual, mill and fill streets, Rudy's crew goes out and identifies curbs that need replaced. We put this out for bid, and then Public Works administrates this contract where we actually, I'll call this preparatory work before mill and fill.
Yeah.
Pasquale was the contractor last year, and we'll bid this again in 2024. You'll see this come back in. And then there are sidewalk contracts, again, that we assist Public Works with. This is root control, where Public Works identifies sidewalks that need replaced due to tree roots. In 2023, this was again Pasquale. This will be bid again this year. And this is very competitive. It's the challenge with this work is that usually the low bidder, they're kind of mid-sized contractors. They're not real big contractors. So they tend to move slowly and they take on too much work. So it's always a challenge to not let them get too much work and get all the work done. The Rudy's guys do a good job with that.
How many miles of sidewalks do we do a year, do you think?
Miles, I wouldn't say we do miles. We probably do about a mile.
Yeah.
When you consider everything.
Yeah.
It's just a guess.
So the commission will see a variety of, upcoming agendas, contracts that are either contract renewals, or contracts that have been put out for bid, and you'll see those, the bid tab for those with a recommendation from the engineer. As part of that, in the agenda item, we will give you the budgeted amount. Sometimes you will see that the low bidder exceeds the budgeted amount, but a lot of those contracts are time and material contracts. So staff and Gateway will work to that budgeted number. So even though the contract bid is above what the budgeted amount was, we will still stay within the budget.
It's not to exceed X dollars.
And do it that way.
And I asked Josh just to color code our schedule for this year. What you see in yellow is work that's really already been bid. These are the first items that are gonna hit your agenda, I believe, at the next meeting. And then the next items in blue are all the street maintenance contracts. Finally, what's in purple will be the paving contracts, the road maintenance and the road reconstruction. So it's sort of we have this rhythm. We try to get this stuff out early, get contractors started, be prepared, get best prices. This is the time to do it. So we're moving quickly on this. That's it.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen.
Sure.
Any other questions, guys? Nothing? All right. I was gonna ask you that. I'm sitting there. Looking at the time thinking,
We're testing me, so.
God, a lot of time for boards and authorities updates. Mine have not met except for MRTSA, and unfortunately, we are looking for a new executive director for MRTSA. The chief who was serving the dual role of chief and executive director has resigned effective mid-February. So we have Steve, able-bodied Steve, writing job descriptions, putting out the ads, just adding to his overall work to try to get somebody hired to replace Josh, although Josh is pretty irreplaceable, so. None of my others have met, so
You stole my thunder.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Anybody? Andrew?
Parks did meet.
Yeah.
We had, our, reorganization meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot to report because my mind was obviously on reorganization. So I
Oh, of
apologize for
course, yeah.
that. But, oh no, Craig was there.
Previously Parks.
I went to the outreach meeting last week and conversation about the upcoming the gala that's coming up. There's also a mystery dinner, I think, on January 29th, I believe. And then Chief gave a nice update as well on how the department is looking to fulfill a position that would kind of coordinate with outreach.
That's an ongoing conversation.
And we did have our first session of the Residents Academy.
Oh, yeah, that's
It was
right. How was
nice.
it, Laura?
myself, Laura, and Andrew.
Yeah,
I thought it went very well. Laura even actually at one point asked the assembled group if they had any complaints, and I think the only one related to somebody being able to register for an event with the Historical Society, which is not us, but we made a note.
right. Pass it on to them. Sure. Oh, that's pretty good.
So, yeah, that's a great group, and I think it's a really great program because it gives people the opportunity to understand sort of how we function and put names to faces for the staff members who are responsible for delivering the various services that we provide to the residents, so. I think it's a good program.
On that line, you know, the Historical Society every year takes the 7-year-olds from, well, second graders, from each elementary school and does a historic walking tour with them. And this year, they always come through the commission chambers, and this year I sat in the commission chambers because my granddaughter is 7 and wanted me there. So what was hilarious about it all was that whoever was in charge of this with the Historic Society brought the wrong pictures for the school that year, for the school that time, which was Markham School. So I had to pinch hit. And so I asked all the kids to tell me what they liked about their neighborhoods and what they didn't like and what they would change. And what do you think the #1 request was? More swimming pools. We need more swimming pools in our neighborhoods.
Checks out.
Yep. Yep. And the thing they liked the most? Friends. They liked having their friends on the street. That's it. They didn't talk about sidewalks.
Doesn't matter. Friends. sweat.
Yeah, all right, we'll see you
I
at 8.
can't argue.
All right, at 8.
Okay. Well, it's the latest.
Yeah, right.